The GNOME Foundation, this is real, now has an official policy of instantly banning anyone who posts a link to an article, a podcast, or a video by yours truly. Instant banning, first offense. This is an official policy now. We've seen all sorts of examples of open source and big tech organizations and companies banning people and threatening people for even just uttering my name. We've seen this for a while now. Recently, the GNOME Foundation banned a prominent core team member of Manjaro, and in fact, the guy that maintains GNOME for the Manjaro Linux distribution, they banned him from GNOME sites entirely because he mentioned my name and he linked to an article I wrote. It's wild and crazy. We recently saw the editor of osnews.com, a tech news outlet, literally threatened murder of absolutely anyone who existed on the same server as me. Like if you're on an open source server and it happens to be the same one as a guy named Lunduke, you declare that you are in fact a Nazi and you must be killed. You must die. It's crazy. It's absolute insanity. Well, now it has been clarified that this isn't just some sort of mild thing that's happening. This isn't like a coinky-dink that all these people are getting banned and threatened for simply uttering the name Lunduke. This is official policy. Someone went over to the gnome.org forum and posted a question, which was immediately flagged and banned and hidden, about people being banned from GNOME for saying the word Lunduke. They were looking for clarification. They were looking for clarification on the story I wrote about GNOME banning the Manjaro Linux team core member. So they just wanted some clarification around that, right? Well, people quickly chimed in that they supported this banning, that if someone was banned for sharing, as this one GNOME team user put it, quote, he was banned as far as I can tell for sharing an article from Brian Lunduke, which as usual, unnecessarily inflammatory. I think a removal is entirely fair and warranted. I do not have enough information about this person to know if a ban was as I don't have more information on that. The writing here is terrible, but it's hard to read it because it makes my brain reset. But that said, I don't want to stray away from this thread. Feel free to contact me on another platform if you'd like to continue the discussion. Okay, great. So they have a little bit of back and forth. But then here's where it gets really interesting. Emmanuel Bassi, a core part of the GNOME team and someone with a bit of influence within the GNOME Foundation, posted this. This is the official policy here. Check this out. Quote, posting naked links to content from Lunduke is an immediate ban on GNOME forums, GitLab, and chat because there can't be no discussion. I don't know what that means. There can't be no discussion, so there has to be discussion? I don't understand. It's a weird double negative sentence. He continues. We don't control what people who watch that kind of content do on other websites, so they are absolutely free to be terrible elsewhere. We just don't allow them to be terrible here. There has been no other ban or removal of posts in this topic, even for people questioning the integrity of the board of directors and the code of conduct committee, something that I'd caution about, incidentally. I need to pick that apart really quickly here. So he says that there has been no other ban or removal of posts in this topic. He might be right about the banning or removal of posts in this post, of individuals. However, I've heard from many GNOME members who have been banned or had their posts censored or deleted simply because they linked to one of my articles. And that has been over just the last couple of weeks alone. So if he's implying that there has been no other bans outside of this Manjaro team member, this gentleman is lying, and I have the screenshots to prove that. The other thing I want to point out here Even for people questioning the integrity of the board of directors and the code of conduct committee, something that I'd caution about, incidentally, is he threatening vaguely anyone who questions the integrity of their board of directors and code of conduct committee? That sounds kind of mafia-esque. I'm going to be honest with you. That sounds fairly messed up, especially considering that the GNOME Foundation Board of Directors flagrantly violates the will of the voters of the GNOME Foundation on the regular. Case in point, they got rid of an elected GNOME board member that the membership of GNOME voted for in secret, in private, and wouldn't even tell anyone it happened for 2 whole months afterwards. They kept it secret from everybody, and they only told people that they did it when it was like forced upon them, like when it was, so they had to tell people. And even then they won't tell people why, because they did it all in secret. So if someone's questioning the integrity of the GNOME Foundation Board of Directors, I'd say they're a smart person, because from what I can tell, the GNOME Foundation Board of Directors lacks significant integrity. But I wanted to call this out, because what we have here is a direct statement from GNOME that they have an official policy against quoting me, linking to me, or I'm assuming just saying my name. Someone chimed in a little later on and said, if nothing else, can the rule of anyone posting content from that person being a bannable offense be posted to the frequently asked questions? Right now, the rule is documented nowhere but this thread, as far as I can tell. And to which Emmanuel Bassi replied, "There is nothing left to discuss. You made your point and you have been told that the rule won't change." So quite frankly, to the point, there is a rule, a hard rule against Lunduke at the GNOME Foundation. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I know of no other rule about any one individual. I know of no other rule about a name within the GNOME Foundation, which would suggest to me, from my point of view, that means that the GNOME Foundation considers me to be enemy number one, right? I mean, this is weird. This is really weird. I've spent years covering GNOME, covering Linux desktop environments across the board, and the vast majority of my coverage of GNOME has been glowingly positive. At various points, I have described the GNOME desktop environment as perfect and how it won me over many years back. I have talked about in years past how their reporting was very transparent and very reasonable. I've talked about what a good job they've done in years past. Now, currently, they're doing terrible, right? They're hiding stuff from their members. They're violating the will of their voters. They're hiring shamans to be their executive directors, who it turns out end up doing a truly hideously terrible job. Everyone dogpiled, by the way. I mentioned when the GNOME Foundation last year hired a professional shaman, and I want to be clear about this. Shamanism is not her religion. It was her job. It was her elected profession. It wasn't a hobby. It wasn't a religion. It was her job. Her job was to teach people how to become professional shamans, right? She created like a pyramid scheme almost, not quite, to try and funnel people into becoming professional shamans, to teach other people to be professional shamans, even though it had nothing to do with shamanism. She just liked that word. She even talked on her website about how she liked that word, so she used it, but she wasn't actually a shaman. Anyway, and she had no real tech experience. And I questioned this. I said, this seems weird to me. Why would you hire this person among all possible candidates to run GNOME, to run the largest open source desktop environment, one used by major big tech organizations, Red Hat and Canonical and IBM and SUSE and on and on and on. Why would you choose that? And I said, you know what? I'm willing to wait and see how she does, how the GNOME Shaman executive director does in the role. Because if she does good, great, high five. Maybe I wouldn't have hired her, but I will 100% support that, because hey, if she does a great job, she does a great job. But it just seemed like she probably wasn't gonna. Well, then it turned out she did a terrible job. She spent the entirety of 9 months on the job before she quit or got fired. It's uncertain, leading GNOME towards close to bankruptcy and failing to get any significant fundraising, failing utterly to talk to anyone in the press. She literally talked to no journalists in the entire time that she was working as the executive director of the GNOME Foundation. Not one podcast, not one tech news outlet. And I'm not faulting her for not talking to Lunduke, though clearly there's a policy against that. But she wasn't talking to anyone, not even the super friendly business-only press. Like, she didn't talk to anybody. And then the only accomplishment that GNOME executive director had was creating a 5-year plan that was like a page long, had absolutely no details in it about how GNOME was going to be profitable, and talked repeatedly about diversity, equity, inclusion type stuff, which makes no sense for a software desktop environment. Anyway, I digress. So GNOME has had a hard go of it. They've done some screwed up things over the last several months. The last year has been rough on GNOME, really rough. And clearly there needs to be coverage of that within the tech press, especially tech media that covers open source, Linux, and these sorts of topics. But I'm the only one covering any of this. The only one. There's no other. Right? You know, you don't go to the Register or Wired or Verge or TechCrunch or ZDNet or any of those and get any of this coverage. And because I'm the only one covering it, GNOME goes on the offensive against me. They create an official policy where anyone simply sharing a link to one of my articles gets instantly banned, GNOME-wide. No matter how important they are, right? That's how dramatically GNOME is terrified of me. It's so much so that they are willing to ban major GNOME contributors, major GNOME maintainers within other Linux distributions, major longtime users, and make it an official policy that they state that they will ban you if you post naked links to Lunduke. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not going to lie, it makes me feel incredibly strong and powerful and virile. Because come on, GNOME is terrified of me. Absolutely terrified. What did I do to earn such terror? I wrote accurately a handful of articles. Not even that many. A couple. Like a half dozen articles about GNOME and some corresponding podcast episodes and some videos to go along with it. And that's it. That's it. And now, did they disagree with any of the facts in any of my articles or shows? No, not once. Not once has anyone from GNOME reached out and said, hey, Lunduke, you've got this wrong. Not once has a single person refuted a single fact and actually pointed to something I got wrong. Not once, not ever. Because they can't do that because I wrote the truth, and I backed it up with their quotes, their statements, their IRS records, their reporting, their annual reports, all of it. I quote it, I screenshot it, I linked to the originals. I'm like, here it is, everybody. Here's what they say. So that's the reporting. GNOME said X. Here's where GNOME said X. Screenshot of GNOME saying X. Link to where they said it. I can't be more factual. It'd be impossible to be more factual in my reporting of GNOME than I have been. And yeah, I've thrown in a little bit of editorializing here and there on top of it because it's so ridiculous. It has to be editorialized on a little bit, right? It's just too utterly ridiculous to not opine on this a bit. So there you go. GNOME flat out has banned people and will continue to ban people for linking to me. I'm assuming that applies to maybe talking about me positively. I'm not really sure. But certainly if you link to me, you get banned. Holy heavens. Now, I expect this sort of thing to continue. I expect this to continue not just within GNOME, but within other portions of the tech and open source world. I know for a fact that several big tech companies have official policies internally to not comment on Lunduke articles, right? They can't, because you can't attack a Lunduke article because of the facts, right? Case in point. This is tangentially related to GNOME, but with Red Hat and IBM, the Red Hat leaks from last December, all those Red Hat leaks came out where we got a whole bunch of exclusive leaks from whistleblowers that came into the Lunduke Journal, and I published a huge mountain of it. Slide decks and internal email screenshots and Slack channel screenshots and pictures of flyers on the wall, all sorts of stuff, just a massive amount of content. And it made Red Hat and IBM look very, very bad. In fact, you see lawsuits going on because of that content right now from states in the United States, from ex-employees, all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's a big deal. In fact, it's possibly one of the biggest stories in tech in terms of how much influence this is going to have on tech employees, on open source and Linux world in particular, because Red Hat is a major contributor to open source and Linux and GNOME and everything else. And so this is going to have a massive impact. But they can't attack me on it. In fact, they can't even mention any of it without it making them look worse, because I have all the facts, I have all the receipts, I've verified everything every which way from Sunday, and they know that, right? They know that I have, right? They can't object to any of it. So the only thing they can do is threaten anyone, including all their employees, just like we're seeing with GNOME team members, threatening other members of the GNOME Foundation should they link to my articles. Red Hat has basically threatened, and IBM has threatened people to not talk about Lunduke, to not interface with Lunduke, to not email Lunduke, to not respond to Lunduke. Their PR teams are told specifically, if a Lunduke article comes out, it doesn't matter what it is, don't respond. Don't respond because it'll make them look bad. This is just going to keep going. This is going to keep on going, and it's absolutely insane. And what's even more crazy than all of this, than this massive, massive censorship, than this massive secrecy that's happening with the GNOME and other foundations, and the threats and the attacks on anyone who even talks about those topics or talks about the articles I write, is the fact that not one other tech journalist, not one, is covering any of this, right? I mean, it's just crazy. I'm going to be straight with you. If this was different, and I was seeing a direct quote from the GNOME Foundation saying that anyone who posted links or content from the register will immediately get banned on GNOME forums, I would record a show and possibly do an article about it, because that's crazy. That would be crazy for GNOME to do that to any major tech news outlet, to any prominent, widely distributed tech journalist. That would be insane to have a singled out, this one tech journalist, this one tech news outlet. If you link to them, you're banned. I would cover that, because that's a weird level of I hate using this word, but we're getting into fascism territory here, right? I mean, by definition. And we're getting to crazy levels of censorship. We're clearly getting to a point where whatever the person who is persona non grata was reporting on, well, clearly they hit on something. Clearly they touched a weak point. They hit it on the head, right? GNOME is afraid of whoever that is. Well, that means there's something there. There's a story there. Some of that reporting, they are afraid not just of people hearing about that reporting, but that reporting will go further and find out something else related to it. Do you know what I'm saying here? That raises all sorts of red flags. Like, why would you do that? Why would you ban anyone who mentions the reporting from this one journalist? What is it that they reported on that you're terribly afraid of? So I would be covering this right now if this was about the Register being persona non grata, or The Verge, or Wired, or TechCrunch, or any of them. But it's not, it's me. And again, what's crazy is no other tech news outlet will report on this. Not TechCrunch, not ZDNet, not the Register, none of them. None of them will. They won't touch on this. Ask yourself why. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, and I think it needs to be asked and it needs to be talked about publicly. ask publicly why. Why are none of these news outlets willing to report on this happening? Why are these news outlets not reporting in depth on the fact that GNOME is banning prominent members, prominent maintainers and contributors, and people who package GNOME for other distributions? Why are they not covering those people being banned for mentioning my name, for uttering the word that shall not be named, the name that shall not be spoken, the Voldemort, the Beetlejuice of the tech world? It's crazy. It's crazy that this is going on, but it is. It's weird because on the one hand, I find it peculiar and strange to be reporting on news that has my name in it so much. I don't mind people reacting to my news and getting upset about it, and I'll talk about it from time to time, and that's fun. But now my name is now a core part of the news around the tech industry, whether it's IBM and Red Hat and GNOME and all these other organizations. And it's a little bit weird. But the news is important just the same. And the reality is, if they can do that to me, they can do that to anybody, right? There's no reason that once this dam is broken, once the doors are opened and the floodgates are out of control, they're already banning Lunduke. Well, what other tech journalists are they going to ban? What other users are they going to ban if they utter that user's name? Will it go further, or will it just stop at Lunduke? Is it just that Lunduke is so mega powerful and scary? Or are they the kind of people within the GNOME Foundation who are just likely to ban words and ban ideas and ban discussion of the truth and refuse to talk to journalists? Is that just the kind of people they are now? I'll leave that up as an exercise for the users. I want to say thank you to all the Lunduke Journal subscribers for making this all possible, for making it possible for me to talk about all this stuff without having to worry about what any potential advertiser might think. You notice there's no ads in this. So going over to lunduke.com or lunduke.locals.com to subscribe, to keep the lights on here at the Lunduke Journal. No tech news outlet will cover what I talk about. No tech foundation will talk to me directly, with a few exceptions. There's a few brave ones out there, but most of them are terrified of me. And that makes it very difficult compared to what other tech news publications can do to get the word out there. Because these foundations and whatnot, they will censor anyone simply posting the link, right? And that's relied on by tech news. If you write an article, if you put up a video or a podcast, you're reliant on people getting the word out by posting those links. Well, now all these outlets, whether you're part of the GNOME Foundation or one of these big tech companies, or you run a Mastodon social network or whatnot, they're just deleting and banning anything with the word Lunduke in it right and left. So in order to get that out there, I'm reliant on all of you to help spread the word, which does put you in the crosshairs of getting banned. So if you don't want to get banned from a lot of GNOME, maybe don't post it to the GNOME forums. But if you do want to get banned from GNOME, now you know how to do it. You're welcome. Get banned from GNOME in this one easy step. A little trick for you. But I rely on it. And so thank you. Thank you to everyone who does help spread the word. Thank you to everyone who subscribes to the Lunduke Journal, that keeps the lights on and keeps us able to do all of this. Absolutely could not do it without you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, ridiculous, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the intertubes, I do declare, end broadcast.